and we are excited to present this fabulous panel to talk about hip-hop as social activism. My name is Marcus Allen, professor of political science here at the college. And I'm also working with Jarritt Sheel on this program, our distinguished lecturer. He's an awesome guy, and he's made these wonderful connections. So big up to Jarritt for doing all this as well. You know, it's befitting that Google yesterday talked about or presented Frederick Douglass to kick off Black History Month. And Frederick Douglass is one of my favorite black people, to say. And because he wrote, you know, what's the 4th of July to a slave? And I just think about the contemporary issues that we've been dealing with related to Black Lives Matter, and all these other issues with the economy. And I keep thinking about this in the context of where we are in 2016 as we look at the election cycle and people of color in terms of how we're still fighting for our rights. And music has always been a medium that we have used to facilitate that voice and also to gather momentum for social activism. And I'm very happy that we have these distinguished guests here to talk about music, hip hop in particular, as a form of social activism. Because if anything, what I think our Guttman model teaches us is really the importance of being civically engaged. And there are many different ways for us to be civically engaged. And music and artistry is definitely one of those places. So at this point in time, I'd also like to thank President Evan for in the back here for being here. And I also want to thank all the other people that have been working with this program and others that we're facilitating throughout the month as well. Just to give you guys a recap, we have a faculty staff fashion show scheduled for February 11th. That information can be found on the portfolio. And we also have a trip to Washington, D.C. with some seats still open, scheduled for February 26th. You can also go to the portfolio and find that information as well. Okay? At this point, I'd like to turn over to Jarritt, and he's going to take it from there.
Hey, everybody. So this is the part where I'm supposed to say something like really dope rhyme, right? But I'm not a spitter. I'm not a rapper, I'm a musician. And a recent transplant here to New York, but I really love music. I like hip hop a lot. Some of you have been in your classes, which is a really cool thing to see people who are engaged and that don't have to come here because they're worried about a grade. For me, at least. And so, when I moved here to New York almost 3 years ago, I ran into all of these really dope people. And I said, I have to figure out how I can maximize the relationship, not to use anybody, but to see how we could do something together. Some of them, and one of my mentors sitting to my left, Tony Blackman, would say build. And so, today is about building. And not just building among ourselves, but like, hopefully in my point of view, to build with you all and the greater New York community. And so what better way to do that is through a form of art and culture that's uniquely American. Hip hop is American, just like jazz and apple pie and tap dance and the electric guitar and the banjo and turntables and a variety of other things. And so we decided to take the idea of what does hip hop do in our community? Because there's good things and there's bad things. And that's everything, right? If you eat too much pie, you'll get sick. You know, that's real. And so, and it's really good, pie is awesome. So is hip hop, you know? And there are good things about it and there are bad things about it, but that's so is human culture, right? And as we look around the table, we have people who are activists. Raise your hand if you're an activist in some type of way. Anybody? Raise your hand if you're a rapper or MC in some type of way. Producer. Let's see. Intellectual. Everybody's saying should go for that. Educator on this panel. A concerned citizen. And last but not least, a human. All right. And I bring all these things up to say that like we're all in the same categories. Sometimes we don't like to see that per se. And so today I want to bring us all together because everybody on this panel looks like all different shapes, sizes, colors, shades. And what we'll do is we're going to start to my right. And if you could just, well, first of all, let me tell you this. I don't want to do the name game because then I know I'm going to totally forget something. But I will say we have somebody on this panel who's written 6 books. Somebody on this panel who's an active music educator in the New York City area, Brooklyn, Queens. Yeah, we have 2 rap activists, band members, entertainers, really cool people from the DC area who do like on the ground level type stuff, like in their neighborhood, in their community. You know, we have somebody who's a formal educator and also is involved with this thing called Science Genius. If you ever checked it out, with is it Jizza, right? Okay. We have somebody who's been running a cipher, how to be involved in a cipher, who's an active MC, who's been in movies. I can probably run down a whole list of things and she'll probably explain those things later. We have a young person just like you who's an actual rapper who's here today. And we also have a business owner, which many of them are business owners already, right? Because they're themselves and they own all their ideas and they make money at it, right? So let's begin. So what's your name?
Good afternoon. So my name is Ed Najapong. I'm a science educator in the Bronx. I teach 6th grade science. I'm also a doctoral candidate at Teachers College Columbia University, where I'm getting my doctorate in science education. And my research revolves around hip-hop pedagogy. How can we integrate hip-hop into our school's curriculums and engage our students with hip-hop and hip-hop culture.
All right, New York City, stand up. I'm sorry, I just wanted to say that. I'm Tim Hicks. I'll stand up myself. Tim Hicks from the Cornell West Theory. We are a hip-hop band based in Washington, D.C. And yes, we do have the blessing of Dr. Cornell West. We'll get into that later, I'm sure, at some point. I'm one of the lead vocalists, the main producer, composer, and I'm a father.
My name is Rashad Dobbins. I'm also in the same band called the Cornell West Theory, and I'm a master of ceremony.
Hi, my name is Jamie Ehrenfeld. I am a vocal music educator at Eagle Academy for Young Men, Brownsville, Ocean Hill, and I also am the Fresh Education Coordinator at Urban Arts Partnership.
Hi, I'm Steve Preskill. I'm a little embarrassed to say that I'm retired, but I've also written a few of those books that Jarritt mentioned, and I took a class with Cornell West in the fall, which was really great, so I'm just pleased to be here with you guys. It's terrific.
Hi, I'm Toni Blackman. I'm an MC, a writer, educator, and an ambassador for hip hop, and I organize cipher workshops. We're relaunching the cipher February 9th. We'll be doing the 2nd and 4th Tuesday at High Arts in East Harlem. So MCs, vocalists, spoken word artists who are into improvisation and freestyle and want to build their skills, please make sure you give me your email address so we can keep you on the list there. And if there are any female MCs, I also run a project called Rhyme Like a Girl. So we're about building, it's about a movement, and it's about encouraging MCs and artists to develop to the best of their abilities so they can make a difference with every rhyme that they spit.
Peace, guys. I'm Shay Ashe, also known as Shannon Morris. I am a rapper, activist. I also am an educator. So I'm just like really, I work with the youth and I am the youth. So I'm really like focused on how, in the youth community, how we can build together. So yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is Jermaine Fletcher. I'm an independent filmmaker and journalist, and I'm the founder, co-founder of an organization called Curators of Hip Hop. Curators of Hip Hop is an organization dedicated to preserving hip hop culture through film, events, and education.
All right, so let's begin. First of all, let's lay down the ground rules. Anytime you have a roundtable discussion, hey, what's up, y'all? A roundtable discussion is usually predicated on a topic. So a hot topic right now in my mind is Black Lives Matter. And not just in the conversation, because I really don't want to really unpack all lives matter versus Black Lives Matter, but what is the impact point where we had to put a hashtag together and we had to say all Black lives matter, all lives matter, Black lives matter. And so social activism is I think an important thing, because all of you are social, you communicate with other people. Only way we create new culture is to bump into other people that are not like ourselves, that rub off a little bit of something that we've never had before. And so part of social activism is social justice, trying to figure out how we all can get along, not be tolerant, but understand. And so I know you all walk the streets of New York every day, unless you teleport some kind of way, right? And so some of you have seen maybe mishandling of citizens by police. You might have seen other citizens mishandle one another. And so how do we use a music, a culture, and a way of teaching that's everywhere? You can't escape it. There's Blackish, fresh off the boat, pretty much any BT show. You know, there's tons of things on MTV. There's commercials everywhere that use hip hop. You can't escape it. You are hip hop. I'm looking at some of your clothes, how you dress, your whole like mannerisms. Some of you probably have a fresh 8 bars ready to go right now. Right now, ready to go. All right, so I decided to find out what was the intersectionality of these two things. This, and how do those two things meet? And so I think all these people kind of do a good job at it. So what I'm going to do is, in a roundtable discussion, I set a series of 5 to 6 questions. And trust me, they're going to talk about probably more about what they do individually. But I picked these people because they're all even-headed. You know, we all can have a good conversation without somebody getting mad, because that's the good part about a roundtable discussion. You're supposed to get a variety of views, not just a bunch of yes men or yes women. All right, does that make sense? All right, so the first question I'll ask is to our esteemed panel of great, awesome people. Please share with us your thoughts on social activism. Give us an example of situations or experiences you've had in which social change is facilitated by agents. And that could be answered through whatever lens that you live in within hip hop and social activism. Anybody? All right, cool.
So the first rule, maybe, of activism and of organizing is bringing people together, getting lots of people to participate in an event, to get behind a cause. And that's one of the reasons why, I'm here more as a person who's been an activist, not someone who's knowledgeable about hip hop, but it seems to me that hip hop is uniquely situated to participate in activism because it is so popular. And that popularity can be used, and has been used, to get more people excited about issues, to get them behind a cause, a concern, a burning desire. And that's why I'm so excited about its possibilities. The other thing I know about activism is, in addition to having lots of people behind that cause or that event, the importance of people power is that there be the importance of a narrative, a story, a a compelling explanation of why we're doing what we're doing. And hip hop, again, is uniquely situated to provide us with multiple narratives, exciting, compelling narratives about why we should move in a particular direction. So, I mean, that's just a start of lots of things we can talk about, but those two things are really important to me. Lots of people being behind something, and that there be this story, this narrative that we're excited about, that we want to take part in, and that we want to see move towards some new point, some new conclusion, some new, rising development.
Can I jump in real quick before the next person goes? So one of the things I really love about hip hop, and I'll kind of echo probably some of the things that Dr. Preskill has said, is it's on the ground. It resists being known. That's what I love about the music, at least. I'm a music person, so what George Clinton said this in an interview probably like 20 years ago. Father, P-Funk, Funkadelics. If you never heard of him, go check him out, George Clinton. And he says this, he says, if the kids like it and the parents don't, it's the new thing. And that's what I love about hip hop. Like every time we try to say it's going to stick, nah, it's this, it's these four, it's something new comes. And that's when I know whether we like it or not, it's the new hot thing, right? So what the point I'm trying to make is it's on the ground. We can never dictate it from the top. So if the message is something you don't want to hear, maybe that's just the message of a group of people that you don't want to hear from. It's hard, like trap music is hard for people to get sometimes. It's like, have you ever been to the trap? Do you even know what the trap is? And what kind of trap am I in? So these are discussions, social activism I love to look at, because I look at the music and I go, yeah, well, you're mad about it and you don't like it maybe per se because you're older, but then whose narrative is it? If I wrote something the other day before, I'm sure the next person wants to go. To the youth go the spoils of the war, the old people. We make all the hip row, and then you all are subject to what we decide, right? So that's why I decided to use social activism. So anybody wants to go next?
You said activism,
Yes.
activism first.
Yes.
To me, activism is an action. At best, I guess if you're dealing with activism, is there such thing as negative? Like, does anybody ever go around and try to make social change for something negative? No, it's always something positive. So
at least they believe it's positive.
Yeah, or they believe it's positive. Hopefully the original intent is positive, but it's an action. It could be the action of an individual. It could be the action of a group. It could be something like the Selma boycotts. It could be Black Lives Matter today, but it could be something as simple as you saying to the 11-year-old, hey man, pull your pants up. It could be something that small.
Yeah, it's funny because this word activism is really interesting, because I'm often introduced as a hip hop activist at events, and it always bugs me out because I've been doing hip hop since I was 10 and doing what I do since I was 10, and there are some people that come out of the womb sensitive and people who are disturbed by injustice. And you live your entire life since childhood fighting against injustice, and you don't need a language for it. All you need is a heart and the courage to take action. And so sometimes I'm still troubled with the label, the categorization, the need for the term. I think I don't think of in comparison to some of my friends who are quote activists, I don't think of myself as an activist per se, but a person who has a heart and big balls and doesn't give a damn about people who want to oppress others. So I just care, and I live from a space of caring, and live from a space of love. And if love means we've got to take somebody down today, then let's get it in. And because there are people who I think are politically conscious in a way that I think is very useful for us, and they become leaders. Those are the people who someone called me recently about doing some correspondence type thing for some media project, and I had auditioned for something else, and they were like, you want to do that? I said, no. So I gave them a list of people whose names they should call. And then the woman implied that there was something wrong with me, or that I was being a punk, or, you know, like I needed to step up. And I just was very clear, like, that's not what I do, yo. Like, I rhyme and I coach MCs and I create spaces for more MCs to become dope MCs. That's what I do. And so I love being in this space as an adult woman. But it's funny because in the beginning, when I first started being really invested in hip hop, and I was a part of the Zulu Nation, and at one point coordinator for Zulu Queens, and I remember there was no word for service. That's just the shit you did. If you were hip hop. If you were hip hop, you tutored young people. If you were hip hop, you helped clean the block. If you were hip hop, you helped the old folks across the street. That's what hip hop is. And I think that when we lose our connection to the true culture and the core of it, then we have needs for these other things and these other definitions. But I really don't consider you hip hop if you don't give a damn about the children and other people and the elderly. You're not hip hop.
So, when we talk about social activism, like social activism is the act of creating an intentional social change, right? So when I think about social activism as an educator, right, I think it's important to give our students the power to become activists and to create social change within their classrooms and within their communities, right? Because we always talk about the youth are the next generation. But far too often, I notice in my spaces, in the schools that I go through, in the schools that I teach at, is our educators and our teachers, they don't necessarily know how to encourage and empower students to become social activists. And sometimes they're kind of scared to empower the youth to become social activists because they're always scared of social change, right? Because nobody really likes change. Everybody's nervous about change. So, but beyond that point, when we think about hip hop and hip hop culture, I mean, hip hop was birthed in the Bronx, in the South Bronx, and hip hop was birthed out of the movement. I'm from the Bronx. Anybody from the Bronx? Yes. There we go. So it was birthed out of the movement. You know, they were building the Cross Bronx through the South Bronx, and you know, South Bronx went through some troubling times, high crime rates, a lot of drugs going around, and you know, hip hop was a way for the community to just come together and have a good time, right? And create a different narrative for themselves, rather than just being involved in crime and drugs. Hip hop is a fun thing. It still is a fun thing, right? And it's just a way for the community to rally around each other, just to show their skills that you don't necessarily see in a traditional classroom, right? So I argue that us as hip hop educators or us as consumers of hip hop, that we have the same skills that you would see as anybody else in a traditional classroom who's exceeding the expectations there.
And I'd like to say, before you even get to social activism, make sure you activate the awareness within yourself. And what I mean by that, when I was growing up, I used to have a bunch of family, and they would always like, man, fuck Bush, fuck Reagan. And so I eventually, when I got into college, I would go to these protests, and I would be like, man, fuck them. And then one day this lady came to me, and she was like, but why? And I couldn't answer her. Because it was just more often an emotional thing, and I was like, I didn't have my word within. I just was like, okay, I'm a part of this group. So I would just say, make sure you have your awareness of what is going on within you first before you get out into the social, so that when you do want to activate within with other groups of people, that your work can be solid and founded on understanding. And that way, it'll come out with this purity, because once I got into Rage Against the Machine, then I could actually start saying why I didn't like these injustices and so on.
Basically, you want to say something?
Yeah, brief. I mean, I think it's clear what social activism is to some people, but I guess to take a slightly different approach, I think I would argue that maybe it's possible that the term activism is a little overused socially and even offline. I feel as though activism really does have to be about the physical, the live action. And so when we talk about, I guess you could say our headline, like a Black Lives Matter, the whole idea that being something for people to get behind, a part of it, you want to embrace, and a part of it, you're kind of upset about the fact that it even has to be. something like that, or people think that that's not necessary or effective. I just believe that at the root of it, though, everything has to be traceable through real actions. I think social media is a great platform to spread the word, but without action that can exist totally offline, there's nothing's going to change. So I do believe that, say, to go to the details of the question, how have we seen these things implemented or the agents associated with it? I feel like probably everybody on this panel and maybe those in the audience things in their day-to-day, which is probably a lot more connected to that activist principle. And I think that's what the activism really looks like, and it comes down to just genuine concern.
I'm just gonna hover around this comment. He was talking about agents of change and like the problematizing the word activism. So there's a young brother sitting up in the front row with this Jean-Michel Basquiat t-shirt on, which I think is really dope. And if you're in the art, some of you are in the Arts of New York City course, and some of you are in my class, and so you know we've kind of explored Basquiat. And I think what the crazy thing about it is that a lot of y'all don't know he was really in hip hop. He might not have been the dopest MC, but he did know how to DJ. He used to do parties. Matter of fact, he was a tagger. Same-o, right? Same-o, right? And that was his name, right? And so, like, I think when you look at some of his art and the intersectionality of art and activism, if you look at Basquiat's art, it's for some people it's really disturbing how it looks so simple and childlike. And it really bothers them, because then in the corner you'll see something like the famous one that I know is the one where he depicts the cop mishandling the young black man. And for some people that's really, and that to me is an activist in a way, because he's creating action within people through using art. And I know there are grander and bigger ways, and I think that's one of the things I love about hip hop is like, when you think it's getting soft, it's not. You know, it has a very soft and hard edge to it. So, anybody else? Yeah.
I believe like social activism is acting with the intent of change, and something as simple as posing a question, that in itself is a form of activism, because that then allows for dialect to be brought up. And one thing that's like lacking, especially in the hip hop community, is these conversations, and it's like people not being accountable for like why are we hearing these type of songs on the radio, and the community that is given to, we're not really being heard. We're not getting that chance to say, I don't want to hear this, or I don't want to, or we're not holding ourselves accountable, and then we're not holding these artists accountable. So I think with I know I'm doing it, and I hope that more people are, is actually opening space for the youth, people in general, just to pose questions and then talk amongst themselves, and that's where we get the care from. When people can actually talk about how they're feeling about something, that is what sparks, that's what sparks the want to change. A lot of people don't get that chance to ask how they're feeling about what's going on. So it's all about caring and actually seeing what matters.
Yeah. No, it's a really good point. I'm not being, funny or, sarcastic in a way, but I mean, as Shay says, look, I've never been an MC. When I want to see an MC, I go holler at Tony, But if I say, hey, you say, come on now, oh my God. If I say, hey, you say, all right, so there's already a call, and then there needs to be a resultant action. So that's all I've ever known for, hip hop. I can't really say that for a lot of different forms of music, Black American music is awesome. Any music that comes out of that community, I think is really great, but any American music, but any music in which it makes you want to do something afterward, that's the thing people are afraid of sometimes when they talk about hip hop, And one of the questions I want to ask to a music educator, and I'll kind of pivot to Jamie, is like, do you ever get pushback for using hip hop music in your classroom? Could you speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. Luckily, within the Eagle Network, I get a lot of support in the cultivation of the Black male scholar, which is the mission of the school and of the network. But within my experience with student teaching and with other settings, learning how to be a music teacher and hip hop are worlds that are so incredibly disparate from each other that you might think that hip hop, that some folks might think that hip hop is not real music. And then that goes a little bit deeper in that, like, in order to become a music educator, you need to go through a sequence of learning the fundamentals of Western classical tradition. Like, that is the way to become a licensed music educator. And
Beethoven.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. Like, that is music, and everything else is some kind of extracurricular thing that is not held as central, which I guess goes to speak to what the field is perpetuating by default. Like that is a manifestation of values, and so I can definitely imagine and have lived within spaces that speaking to other music educators about hip hop at the least makes them uncomfortable. At most, when I say, well, what do you mean it's not real music? They're like, well, it's like there's no like melody or like, and come up with any kind of justification that goes into like what they see music as and what they see music as being for. And that in itself is a value judgment that needs to be unpacked by who is actually holding those values as like deeply personal and as their truths.
So Jeremy brings up a good point. You know, this idea, and I think when I first met Mr. Hicks, Dr. West was talking about this, the idea of there are no spaces where politics does not happen. There are no spaces. I'm sorry. There's always politics everywhere you go. Come on, if you want your mom to do something for you, what do? You do something nice, right? You do an extra chore. If you want your girlfriend or boyfriend to do something for you, you whine a little bit, or you do some kind of dance, and that's all politics. What do you think those people on the stand that trying to get you to elect them the president are doing? They're playing you, right? And I don't mean that in a super negative way, but I mean they're playing you as in they're trying to play with the strings. You know, there was this old story about a guy named Geppetto who made a little boy called Pinocchio, right? And you ever notice if you read the story, all the trouble starts when the strings are cut. All the trouble Pinocchio gets and all of these horrible things that happen and gets swallowed by a whale and whatever, but that's after the strings are cut, right? He's been playing, now he's making his own decisions, right? He's unprepared to, right? So then one of the questions, since it's a political space, I will ask, what change has hip hop created in your neighborhood or your community? Have you seen any positive change? Have you seen any negative change? Have you seen change, period? So any of you, please. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm seeing hip hop affect many communities, but mainly from a influence standpoint. I guess my perspective on communities is a little different than most, though, because I would say that a community often is mislabeled or used to refer to as territories. And I feel like...
Say that again?
I feel like communities is used as a term but oftentimes it's really a territory that we're talking about. And I call it a territory because there is in fact a lack of community and a lack of unity within these territories. So you have a lot of people that live in the same territory, but they may not know each other's name. They don't have aunts and uncles and elders in this community or so-called community, but we call it a community. And so it's hard to gauge what impact hip hop is making in a territory. But what I will say is that the places we've traveled as a company, where we found these communities, whether on college campuses or high schools or whatnot, it is doing good work, but it's obviously, it is receptive to those who are fully kind of invested in it. And so I could definitely point out those very key examples where, say for example, a part of our company tour this year, we're going out to San Francisco for a group called Rock the School Bells. It's their 9th year, and it's this whole initiative of like hip hop, academia, activism, all these things combined, and it's a full day thing. And so people like that are on the ground. They don't just like stop working after that day, but they work all year long. And so you have thousands and thousands of people like that. They're invisible. They're everywhere though, and in their communities.
Anybody else want to talk about neighborhood or community?
I work with New York City youth all over. I work in multiple different high schools, and what I do with them is I mentor them, and I also teach an after-school music production class, and I intentionally introduce almost like how are you feeling into the music. So I want them to like talk about their lives, and I want them to, whenever I'm in the class and I'm teaching them through music, I want them to really give me lyrics that's like about your day. If you have a girlfriend, if you have an issue with a girlfriend or a boyfriend, talk about it in your music. And what music does, it like allows people to be more free to speak about these issues in a more compelling way that's more culturally responsive. Because a lot of times, I'm talking about the school community. When you're in school, you're being lectured at all the time. You're forced to sit down, you're forced to pay attention, you're forced to listen. There's no room for asking questions sometimes, there's no room for talking about how you're feeling about it. So I use music as a way for people to like really think about the things that they're facing in their communities and bring it in a fun way, bring it out. I know I'm all over the place, I'm sorry.
Okay.
All right, hip hop.
Yeah.
Hip hop has directly affected Washington D.C. and my neighborhood because it gave me purpose. I could have been anybody else, that the hood wants you to be, or the country you live in wants you to be, the world you live in wants you to be. But hip hop gave me something that said, hey, well, this is just like me. I stand out. I don't fit in. Or maybe I do fit in, but whatever this is, this sound is me. So hip hop gave me purpose. So that's one direct influence. Another way I could say that is just that the type of hip hop that was coming out at the time that I was growing up. I know I look 16 with a beard to most of you, but I'm 38. So I grew up in a time period where you had KRS-One at the forefront. You had Public Enemy at the forefront. You had Poor Righteous Teachers. These are just some names that I could throw out of hip-hop artists. I call them musicians because hip-hop is a music form. That were speaking about things outside of just, hey, get the money, hey, get the girl, hey, let's create the Carter, which is a trap, basically, a drug establishment. You could be all those things, but then you had a Public Enemy to come and say, oh, crack is whack. Nowadays, we exist in a time period where those things are almost invisible. You might, I could ask in this room right now, and I'm sure if I get an answer that goes past 3-5 people, it's gonna be people that are not known on the mainstream. But if I said right now, throw out a name to me that you would associate with quote unquote conscious hip hop, I'm guaranteeing probably that I will get 2 names. I might get Kendrick, I might get J. Cole. There's a problem with that. It's not that I have some sort of hatred towards the trap artists, gangster rappers, whatever. Hip hop is all those things. But in my coming up, it was a balance. So you didn't have everybody wanting to be a quote unquote shooter. You didn't have cats wanting to be a kingpin. You didn't have cats wanting to be pimps. It was other things that you could choose, you know, with your life. Now, everything sounds the same. Hip hop isn't even regional anymore. It's no New York sound. I want to say that as a DC kid that was influenced so much by the East Coast and New York and all the hip hop, not just the side, but what happened to the New York sound? I was in Bed-Stuy in the summer and I'm hearing stuff that's like, yo, that gotta be from down south. Bobby Shmurda, yo, that gotta be from down. They're like, nah, that dude grew up right around. I'm like, Brooklyn? So, you know, that's how hip hop is affecting the community now.
So I think when I think about that question about the impact, first of all, I think back, and I think back to the 90s in DC, when this guy was just a baby. You should have seen him, he was so cute. But we would have these, we have freestyle gatherings, freestyle workshops with a project called Freestyle Union, Cypher Workshop in DC. And one of the most beautiful things that would occur is that you would have, there was a guy who worked for the post office. There was a guy who was an architect by profession and a DJ by night. There were the folks who went to Howard University and University of Maryland. There were the skateboarders with purple hair coming in from the suburbs in Virginia. There were the teenagers who went to public high school from around the way and the kids who came from Duke Ellington School of the Arts. There were women, there was straight, there was not straight. There was just so much diversity and range in the room, and for me, it was the perfect picture of hip hop. We even had MCs. There was an MC who came from Italy. There was an MC who came from France. And they would sit in and hang out with us. You know, they didn't rap in English though. And they would stay for more than just one cypher. They'd come back again. And they'd come back again because of the vibe and the space that hip hop provides. And hip hop provides a container for spiritual consciousness, even amongst atheists and agnostics. Right? It's like hip hop does that. And there's something about the music and the culture and this vibration. I tell in my hip hop 101 workshops for teachers, I say that you can you can put me on a plane, drop me anywhere on planet Earth. And as long as you can show me where the hip hop heads are, I have a place to sleep and something to eat. And it's very true. Anybody who's a head knows this to be true. And it's something that I haven't learned yet to articulate. Maybe there are scholars who have words for it. But it's like trying to define jazz, you know? Trying to define soul. At its essence, you can't even define hip hop either. Although there are definitions written in books. But for me, I think that is one of hip hop's greatest impacts. And it's in my community, but it's in communities all over the world. And I've been to 41 countries, and I've seen it happen over and over and over and over again. And I've also seen hip hop create educators. In the context of these cypher gatherings and cypher workshops, the MCs are coming together, and I can say in the circles that I've organized, at least 50% of them go on to be teaching artists. And there's something very revolutionary in a society that does not respect, value, or treat our educators with any sense of dignity. And they're so underpaid that these artists still want to go teach. That's like revolution within itself. And so it becomes a space where I see impact. We're having a Cypher Summit at High Arts, 651 Arts Foundation, and High Arts are helping us to make this happen. And it's a gathering on Wednesday, March 9th for anybody that wants to come. But it's this idea that the Cypher is a space for us to gather and to build and to share and to grow. And that it doesn't have to be under the guise of HIV awareness. It doesn't have to be under the guise of literacy or we're gonna fight homeless. But it's this thing where people have issues with arts for art's sake, not realizing that arts for art's sake is not just about the art, but it's about the heart. And that without music, without comedy, without film, where would we be as a world without poetry? We wouldn't be anywhere, yet art gets put down here on the ground. I can go on this.
Yeah. So I have an emerging thing question just came out from listening to you talk. Everybody's brought up the idea of community. And so I'm always amazed at how hip hop and hip hop culture and music and art and the ways that come out, the ways of knowing, a good Eminem quote, hip hop is a way of knowing. And one of the things I wanted to find out was, so I'll direct the question toward Dr. Preskill, but it's for everybody. But how do we bring people to be civically engaged? How do we get people to be more invested and have more onerous for the things they find important, as a hip hop community? How can we?
Well, in a way, I don't really feel like I'm qualified to answer, but I'll talk about civic engagement just briefly and generally. It's a little bit like what you were saying before about hip hop's on the ground. Civic engagement at its best is on the ground too. So there are issues happening in a community that aren't removed from students or aren't removed from people who want to get they're part of their everyday lives. And so we identify those things and we help people maybe make sense of them a little bit and think about some strategies for dealing with those issues, whether it is hunger or homelessness or racism or something else. And then I think I love this idea of that posing a question can be a really powerful form of action, and then having the conversation. But I think it's a conversation that has to be so interesting and so important to us and so compelling that we want to take part in it, that we can't resist being a part of that conversation. And it might even be a little over our heads, but it's such an interesting conversation we want to learn so that we can take part in it and interact with others around it and take action with others around the issues that are coming out of that conversation. And then just one other thing. Once we take action, and everybody's talked about activism as action, individual action, community action, group action. Once we take action, then we come back and we talk about it. Sometimes we call that reflection. It doesn't matter what we call it. We come back and we talk about, well, how did it go? What difference did it make? What impact did we have? What have we learned that we can take to the next action? So there's a kind of back and forth process. There's that conversation that happens, that action that we take, that reflection that we have, and then the new action that we take is maybe it's a little more involved or sophisticated than it was before.
So what Dr. Preskill is talking about, it has this, he just triggered, pushed the button. This is why freestyling is so important. Because if you can't spit in the moment, that means you cannot convey your emotions in a rhyme. That means that you can't bring the fire when it's very necessary for you to be a revolutionary lyricist, right? And so people write off this artsy freestyling thing, right? But how can you be in the conversation and start a conversation if you can't conversate with what it is that you do? This is why MCs have to build their skills. This is why if you rhyme, you have to have range of ability and have the capacity to communicate and express yourself in a variety of ways. This is why the cipher is important. Without the cipher, there is no dialogue. It's just you and your 16 bars. Him and his 16 bars. Her and her 16 bars. And guess what we all doing while we waiting to get our 16 bars? We practicing in our head. We're not even listening. So there's absolutely no conversation. And you talk about one of the biggest things wrong with rap today, that is it. Ooh.
Truest story I ever heard. So one of the things that comes out of that, I think, we talk about like on the ground and participating. One of the things I wanted to bring up was just the idea of engagement. How do we engage one another?
That's a hard question, though.
can't really tell anybody how to engage another person, but I think one of the things is, Tony brought it up, was just listening. That's one of the things I like about checking out the Cypher, or, let me tell you, my background is I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and I fell in love with music. I watched a movie by Spike Lee called Mo Better Blues. I saw Denzel playing the trumpet, and I thought, and all the ladies loved him, and I really wanted to learn how to play the trumpet. It's a true story. My mom would tell you, true story. And then I got more and more into music. But at the same time, this was the same parent who took me to see Tougher Than Leather, which no child at that age should have seen it. But anyway, she's a revolutionary, and she takes me to see this, Run DMC, Beastie Boys. It's like the story of Def Jam. It's a lot of stuff in that movie. All right, so I see that, and I still buy the shell-toe Adidas, and I had my little, Adidas jumpsuit back in the day, McCain Gold, and I thought it was hot, and I really love music. And what I, over the 2 decades I've been playing music, is that, man, none of it matters how good you can play if you're not having a dialogue with other musicians. And some of you all saw that concert last week where they had the jazz band. What made the trio sound so good was that they were communicating with one another. So they've built their skill on the instrument so that no longer are they constrained by the physical rigors of playing it. They're just like in the moment. And it's what some scholars talk about, having that moment where they're just focusing on the thing. And they're not worrying about, I gotta do something weird. So how can we engage one another as artists, as hip hoppers, as lovers of hip hop, as hip hop activists, as advocates for hip hop, or people who just, feel that they embody hip hop, whatever. How do we engage one another? We talked about what we might want to engage over, but how do we engage one another? Anybody can jump in.
I feel like engagement can happen anywhere where a group of people gather. And so from my perspective, it's asking the questions, just like you were saying. Like you engage people not necessarily by referring to it as a conceptual far-off thing, but activism for many people is the processing of lived experiences, and in that processing, realizing what is right, what is true, and going from there. That's having the space to do that is something that can happen anywhere where one can create that space. So that can even happen online in a school setting. That's something that an educator definitely has the power to create that space for their students. And I think that's one of the most critical things as an educator that someone can engage in, is that it's not as though that the things that are going on are far removed or like happening somewhere else, but it's about asking the questions and making the space for the processing to happen as a collective, and then using that to create art to transcend, to create action, to move as a unified front and continue to spread the work.
Dope. So watch this. So what Jamie just brought up, what Ms. Ehrenfeld just brought up, was 2 words that jumped at me. Critical, collective, and so I'm gonna pitch this question to Tim and Rashad. So as you live in DC and you're involved in raptivism or hip hop or activism and all those things, well, first, could you give us a little why the Cornell West theory, and then maybe what made you go on to do the things you're doing in DC with hip hop?
You gonna go first, but I just want to open it by saying one way of engaging each other is don't be afraid to call something whack. I don't know if you know what that word whack means. I'm gonna ask y'all because y'all are, a couple years removed from me. Whack might mean something else because swag is acceptable now, meaning if you're doing something right, on fleek, if you got something going, So is there a word for whack now? Terrible, horrible, sucks? don't go along with the crowd. That's one of the things I want to ask y'all is please be an individual. If it's something on the airways and you know it stinks, like you know in your heart of hearts that this is garbage. As soon as I cut it on, there's no way to redeem this. This is why. Please be one of those people to step up when your friends is out that joint like, no, you know, let's do it. And it's like, really? Like, it's not causing you to think in no way? And you cool with that? Like, everything can't be political, everything can't be conscious, but in order to get that balance, in order to even open the conversation, don't be the person that's just like, it's great, it's awesome, and you know it's garbage.
And just to back on that, how I got engaged with hip hop when Tony Blackman started Freestyle Union, all the MCs were uniquely them. It was so inspiring that I decided I had to go home and find my own voice and mix that with Jimi Hendrix, because I was like, I gotta be the Jimi Hendrix of hip hop. So I was just like, so when I saw these unique MCs, that immediately made me want to meet them and say, how did you get your style? And then just totally be yourself, totally be unique.
Bring us back, Brother Jarritt, the question specific.
We're just talking about critical, collective, and how did you all get into the Cornell West area? Like, how did that come up?
It came up one day we had...
Who is Cornell West?
Okay, who is Cornell West? The first thing I say to people is if you don't know who he is, Google him. Because everybody can get to a search engine, all right? So it's, you know. But Dr. West is, among many things, a person who cares. That's probably a great way to describe it, somebody who gives a fuck. That's basically who he is, you know what I mean? At the core, he's an activist. He is a public speaker, he's an author. He's been in 2 of the Matrix films, so I don't know, you know, even the Matrix might be old to some of y'all, ain't like Keanu Reeves, like, yeah, but Doc is many things. What he stands for, what he represents, those ideas are some things that touched us, that affect us, we felt moved by, and so we were at the ending of one band or group, and probably some weeks later, one day I was just sitting somewhere and I heard in my head the Cornell West theory. And I was like, I called him, I said, what do you think about this name?
Swag.
Well, he actually said that's the one. So from there we connected with Dr. West, you know, praying that he would give his approval, and he was cool. Yeah, he immediately was like, you got my blessing, brother. So, you know, from there on, but just, I guess ultimately it's just like, yeah, we feel like there's something missing in hip hop. The stuff that I want to hear is not out there right now. If it is, it's like smashed to, you know, the bottom where you got to keep digging through like layers of mud just to find like this 1 or 2 good people that are definitely out there, but mainstream will have you believe that they don't exist. You know, so Cornell West theory was created like, nah, good hip hop is out there, great music is out there, people that care, people that give a fuck are out there.
And to me, there was a lack of sacred femininity in the art, and I knew my friend Yvonne Gilmore and Katrina Skinner, and I was like, we need soulful women to come in and blast this thing open with a part of this group, because I just felt like the
oversaturation of big balls in hip hop.
Macho, they call it macho now.
Yeah, we just needed that sacred feminine perspective, combined with also a masculine perspective, because we see in this world now there's this huge agenda to kill the masculine principle, and so we were like, we need to combine those two and connect it to our generation, the younger generation, and Dr. West's generation in this one timeline.
Being a bridge.
I have a question though now for the panel. I'm gonna point it to Edmund real quick, but how can America better serve its communities by embracing hip hop? So that's a you know, a question that we all have is like, you know, when people, your parents and your grandparents and your friends and your aunts and uncles, you know, talk about how they see something as negative, how can we get them to see that not to diss rock and roll or to diss country or to diss classical? that's what we need to do in order to get to hip hop. That we're just asking maybe for everybody to listen to everything. Good music is good music. I think Duke said that, Duke Ellington. You know. And so now I want to know, because I know you do stuff with Dr. Kristen in Teachers College, and you do this thing called Science Genius, supported by great artists like Jizza from Wu-Tang Clan, you know, 36 Chambers, Cream, all that. So could you tell us a little bit more about, well, at least why do you think America could better service communities by embracing hip hop? Maybe you could talk about education.
Absolutely. So, initially, the first thing that comes to mind when we think about just like how can America better serve, you know, our communities. When I think about our community, I'm thinking specifically urban communities, like where hip hop is birthed, right? And I think the first thing American society can do, or we can do as a society, is number one, embrace hip hop. Number one, not only as a genre of music, but also as a culture. A lot of us forget, and a lot of people don't even know that hip hop is more than just music, right? Like from the way you dress, from your mannerisms, from the way you talk to other people, from the way you walk down the street, from the way you carry yourself. That's hip hop, right? And if you identify somebody from the hip hop generation, not just, you don't have to be a spitter or an MC or a producer. You don't have to do anything with music, but you can identify with hip hop, right? Like how many of you in this room listen to hip hop on a daily basis? Raise your hand. Right, so you are all participants of the hip hop generation, right? And I think the stigma that comes with hip hop is if you look at the people who, not even the people who consume hip hop, but where hip hop was birthed and the people who create hip hop, right? And hip hop was started and was created by a marginalized group of people. So I think that's where the majority of the stigma comes. So I'll talk more about the Science Genius program. And the Science Genius program is essentially a program where I'm a science educator and I love hip hop. Grew up hip hop. The first song I memorized was Puff Daddy, All About the Benjamins. He was still named Puff Daddy back in the day, right? And so with Science Genius, what we do is essentially go into high school science classrooms and we engage students who are traditionally disengaged when it comes to science content and curriculum, and we bring hip hop into the classroom. So one of our lessons will look like, you know, okay, you guys are learning about cells, so let's throw on an instrumental who can write like 4 bars about cells. So we're bringing the content, we're bringing the hip hop into the classroom. And students love it because it's an opportunity where they can see themselves and things that they do outside the classroom in the classroom, especially when it comes to a subject area where they probably would struggle with their entire lives, right? But you know, when we talk about Science Genius, I can tell you like all these phenomenal stories when it comes to students who are changing the narrative of hip hop, right? And these students are creating amazing songs they're dope rhythmically, right? They're just dope songs, period. But they're also like dope science content songs where students create songs and they take their reads a couple weeks later and they're like, yo, Edmund, that song actually helped me answer a couple questions on my Regents. So we're doing 2 things, right? We're engaging students in science content through hip hop, but we're also pushing back on like what you're talking about is like the consumer-based hip hop that we're kind of getting tired of, right? We're trying to bring like the real rap back to hip hop. And our students, they're creating music on a level that a Drake will create music, that a hip hop artist who like you listen to daily will create music. And that's the beautiful thing. We're trying to change the narrative of hip hop writ large and hip hop in general, right? Through students creating these science content raps. And we have like students have bars and songs online. It's just dope. I just drive in my car and I'm listening to my regular playlist on shuffle, and then one of my student songs will come on. I'm like, oh, this is actually aight, and I'm listening to it. You know, normally you listen to songs that you don't like to listen to, just skip it. But I actually listen to these songs, and trust me, I don't listen to everything, right? So it's through this program. Not whack. It's not whack, right? It's not trash, right? Absolutely. And you know, through this program, like I said, we're doing 2 things. You know, where we're pushing back against hip hop, consumer-based hip hop, and we're engaging students with science content. And I think it's just beautiful for students to see themselves like, oh, I can still be who I am, hip hop, you know, and wear the Basquiat shirt and wear the fitted in class, but I can still be a scientist, right? And you normally see scientists wearing lab coats and glasses and like looking like Einstein. All scientists don't look like Einstein. I'm a scientist. I have 2 science degrees. I don't look anything like Einstein. So I think those are definitely the stereotypes and that we're trying to push back when it comes to Science Genius.
So now kind of pivot a little bit more. Same question, but kind of through a music educator standpoint. So Jamie, would you mind talking a little bit about urban art partnerships?
Yeah, no, as Evan was
What
speaking.
is that? What is that?
As Evan was speaking, I was like, oh, I do just about the same thing with ELA and social studies. Urban Arts Partnership is the largest arts education organization in the United States, in New York City and in LA. And the program that I work with is called Fresh Education. And it started out as a Regents Prep program for students who have previously failed the Regents exams in history to start out, and have also expanded into ELA, and utilizing hip hop as a mode to gain the content knowledge that they need to beat the test, get out of high school, and do something better with their lives than the option that they would have for not having graduated. It's expanded a little bit so that it's also a teacher professional development model in middle schools, where we also have students creating content-based music. And something that I thought was really interesting that Edmund said is that it's kind of changing the face of hip-hop and consumer-based hip-hop. And my response to that is that I think that this work is actually changing the face of education. It's changing the face of education because just like he was saying, like, you can move forward in a way like you don't necessarily, not everyone learns the same way, and utilizing a culture that has been repeatedly marginalized, ignored, and actively discouraged within school settings, you are creating space to change the narrative of education. What does a high school graduate look like? What does a college graduate look like? We've had a relatively narrow description of who makes it and how one is able to make it, and the valuing and the leveraging of culture towards education in a way that students are able to drive it at that point. I think it's changing the face of education at least as much as it's changing the face of hip hop.
I want to highlight one more thing. 'Cause I don't think we actually realize how important and groundbreaking like this hip hop work is in the classroom, right? So I want you all to think about a moment or a time in your life where you were going through something emotionally, right? You're going through a hard time in life, and then you heard this one song that you can relate to, right? Has anybody ever had that moment? Like all the time, right? So that's like, I want to talk about some of this hip hop and therapy work that one of my colleagues at Teachers College named Ian Levy does, right? Where he encourages students just to share their emotions and disclose their emotions through hip hop. So the kids, like he has his own studio in his school, right? And they create hip hop songs based on their experiences and based on their emotion and their emotions. It's an emotional outlet, a mental health outlet. And if we know about mental health in urban communities, right, we know that there's a stigma when it comes to mental health. Like, if you have a mental health issue, like, nobody's gonna pay attention to you. Or if you have to see a psychiatrist, everybody's gonna think you're crazy, right? So it's hard for, people in urban and marginalized communities to seek help. But, using hip hop as an alternative way to disclose our emotions, it's so dope. And he's working with great students in the South Bronx doing this work. I mean, you can all just check it out. It was actually featured in the New York Times, I think, last week.
Yeah.
Just Google Ian Levy and hip hop therapy. You'll see how transcending this work is. So we have the work in content areas and subjects across, in our schools. We also have it in our counseling sessions and in our therapy work as well.
So one of the reasons I wanted to get all the people together is I want these people, and I want you to know that they're, I mentioned it earlier, Professor Emden works at Teachers Columbia, and he's real big in the hip hop science ed. He has this article, it's called Affiliation and Alienation. And then it says this one really profound line in page 5 or 6 where it just says hip hop is a way of knowing, right? So all of us are different, our fingerprints are different, our eyes are different. Even if we have a twin, there's something about you that's a little bit marginally different, right? That separates you from the other person. And so how do we see the variety of ways of knowing, right? Just like hip hop. Yeah, if you look at graffiti in the Bronx, it doesn't look the same as graffiti in Brooklyn. Hip hop looks a little different in Korea. That's what I've been told by Jermaine. It looks the same, it acts the same, but the people don't look the same. Does that make sense? So even if it's the same beat, we all perceive it a little different, right? And so I do it through art, he does it through science, they do it through live performance, she might do it through music education, So then the next question is, because we all do it differently, that means that it's more than just poor communities, right? Is hip hop only in poor communities? Come on, that should be a resounding no, right? SoundScan, I think last year was like 13 million records sold, hip hop records or something like that, but, you know, legally sold or downloaded. And I would say, do you think 13 million of your friends bought those records, or just 13 million people? So I'm gonna tell you the history of music sales. In America, there was this thing called the record player. Before that, the phonograph. And the phonograph was, at the time when you could buy a meal for 5 cents, the phonograph was $27. So if you could buy a meal for 5 cents, and the record player was $27, and you were bringing home 10 cents a day, it was a lot of money, right? So if at the beginning, some of the records that were sold in the beginning of the record industry were predominantly black artists. So if the record player cost $27, and you made 10 cents a day if you bought 1920s, and the record cost $1, and they were music by black artists, who do you think probably predominantly were buying these record players and these records? Okay, people socioeconomically blessed, right? So predominantly in America at that time would have been European Americans, right? So, and that still continues today. You know, it's not just as record players and records and those kind of things, but the idea that music is only consumed by one group. And so that's what the power of like what you're listening to and what they do is, because it's in multiple communities. You know, I'm sure there's some kid in Iowa with the Cornell West Theory record. You know, that'd be dope. You know, and it's somebody somewhere that has, you know, Tony has a book coming out, you know, about, you know, a lot about hip hop and the cipher and different things. So we want those things in different communities. And so then now my question is, since I asked how does hip hop better serve the community, what about underserved communities? How can hip hop better serve underserved communities?
Stop making wax.
Stop making white records. Are those, and our underserved communities, are those important to us? And these are, yeah, anybody can talk about. These are questions that we all need to talk about. You know, is helping poor people important to you? And if so, why?
So, I have 2 masters from Teachers College University, and I decided, I'm an educator, I work in the Bronx. I work in the same community and neighborhood where I went to middle school. Not the same exact middle school, because I have horrible memories at my middle school and can never go back. But when we think about like how can hip hop help and support underserved communities, me personally as an educator, I'm always thinking about how can hip hop better reach our youth, right? And I think it's hip hop music, definitely through music and through like programs like Science Genius and encouraging students to freestyle and be deliberate about what they're talking about. But as a real educator, I'm thinking about how can we engage students through hip hop in our classrooms? So I'm thinking about hip hop through pedagogy, right? And if we know about pedagogy is the art and science of teaching. So how did your teacher teach you, right? So maybe a lot of you, when you were in schools, your teachers had a PowerPoint up and, you know, so just copy the notes, or just gave you worksheets every day and just said, fill this out and, you know, learn on your own, right? But in my classroom, I identify as a hip hop pedagogue, right? Where I use hip hop, or we have hip hop as 5 creative elements, right? I use all the 5 creative elements in my instruction purposely to engage my students and to make them excited about science. So like we have call and response, right? And my classroom is always super loud, and I'm right next to the principal's office, but she's cool. So like you want to welcome the things that the students do outside of school inside the classroom to better help them learn their content, or better help them get more excited about the content, especially when it comes to content areas like science and mathematics. But I think that just to get students and people in underserved communities just more engaged and more active in education, because we know our education statistics and how students, like, they fall out of school right after middle school and high school because they don't have the necessary support. So how can we encourage our students to, like, just have that confidence in that love for learning, right? And it's more, to me, it's about students seeing themselves in the classroom and then realizing that they can be who they are authentically, right? So I can be who I am with my pants sagging a little bit, with my shoelaces tied this certain way or my hat on backwards, sitting in the classroom in an academic space. But I could also be a lover of learning, and I could also love to like learn different things. I'm not like labeled a geek or somebody who's not cool for learning, right? And I argue that there's no kid in the world who doesn't want to be praised for having the right answer, right? That just sounds like ridiculous. So I just understand how we have so many students in our schools just failing miserably and nobody's doing anything about it. So, you know, for me, hip hop is a way to serve our underserved communities and to engage our students, to have them just be better, especially when it comes to schooling and education.
And I like to add, I like to add to that though, to really accept the reality that a lot of students don't care about the classroom and are not going to be in the classroom and are not going to be engaged inside of those four walls. And a lot of the stuff that I've done and the teaching artists who are educators that I know have done is in critical programming, which happens after school. And it's that time of day when kids get pregnant, when kids get locked up, when kids commit crimes, when kids take drugs. And I think it's really, really important to be very cautious about how much we attach ourselves to the institutions when a lot of these institutions have such great problems. I don't give a damn how great of a teacher you are, right? If the principal sucks and there's mildew in the bathroom and there are no books, it don't matter. Everybody's gonna be struggling. And so I think service really has to be about the artist, and I know Tim and Rashad know what I'm talking about, the artist taking yourself so that you are strong enough when you are on the front lines, in the trenches, to sustain yourself when you hear about Bobby's sister getting shot while she's pregnant walking through Berry Farms, right? And Berry Farms is a housing project in DC where I started doing hip hop education work in my early years, and I wasn't. That shit stressed me the hell out. What? And there was something happening every week, and so the service really begins with making sure that you yourself are sane and that you are not operating from a martyrdom syndrome and that you check your educational elitism at the door and understand that different children have different needs. Different communities with different problems require different approaches and different solutions. And it is a lot more work than it seems to be on the outside. But there are many of us, that is our purpose and calling in life. So what I had to do was learn how to take breaks. I went through a serious burnout when the middle school teachers thought I was a Band-Aid and I was a vitamin C pill. And I had 10 programs at once in DC, then I had like 15 programs. I was 15 schools at once in New York City, public schools. What was I thinking? The checks were nice once I added them up. But I ended up burned out. I couldn't work for like 3 years after I did the juvenile detention centers and was working with women who have been raped. I ended up burned. I was on my back for like 2 years with no money, wondering what was wrong with me. And then I had to find healers, traditional healers, who thought outside the box, trained therapists and psychologists who thought outside the box to really guide me back to a space of wholeness. And I think that the service has to start there. There are a lot of overeducated assholes in this world. People who have no compassion, who are judgmental, and who are just not the best teachers in the world. I'm sorry. There are a lot of people with a lot of problems and issues, people running after school programs who have so much baggage that then the kids and the workers don't want to go in. Everybody dreads going to work, dreads going to programs, so they show up for the free snack. Really, you know what I'm talking about. And so there's that space. But I think we have to, I think the beginning is the beginning, and the beginning is what you see when you look in the mirror in the morning. Are you fair? Are you loving? Are you patient? Are you hating on your fellow hip-hop educators? Right? How are you of service? Do you only call people when you need something? How good of a human being are you really at the end of the day? Do you show how you care? And I think that's, for me, that's the space I'm in. And that is, I think, one of the importance of what Rashad was talking about, the feminine presence, is that the feminine presence reminds us then of these things that sometimes get neglected.
Hello? Oh, sure. I'll be quick. I would say to serve better in any community, I think we have to get more into a conversation of what a more independent mentality and execution looks like for hip hop. So hip hop can't really depend on a sponsor to do a fundraiser, to do an event that's good for the kids in the community. And hip hop depends on too many things, too many forms of validation, too many award ceremonies and things like that oftentimes, that without that independence, which is basically a universal principle, we have to be able to take care of ourselves as a hip hop community. And this can relate to anybody in any profession sitting in the audience. Now it's like you have to have a certain degree of, she actually said it, like being able to take care of yourself, and that comes with a certain sense of accountability. If you're gonna really make an impact outside of yourself, you gotta get yourself together first. But as a hip hop community, we rely, if you break it down and you look at what's going on, there's too much relying on so many external factors just to get by, just to survive, just to do little things here and there and never really create a massive impact. So the reason, summing up, why we formed Curators of Hip Hop was like, back in 2009, it was at a state where, you know, similar to the brother down there saying, we didn't really like what we were hearing musically, we didn't like the images, we didn't like the visuals. So we independently decided to form our own company where we would dictate, you know, all the visuals, all the narratives. We would feature only the artists we thought were important, not to be elitist or anything, but just to give artists who were not getting enough light in our minds more light and more attention, the same type of attention that other artists would get. And so that has always been a part of it. And I feel like whatever your concern is, you have to take that same approach and be more independent about it. And so going to that question, like what can America do? Hip hop has to take care of itself first, and the people that care within those communities have to do their job first. And nothing's gonna come to the rescue.
Yeah. How can hip hop help? Well, first, let's say this, because I don't think we've said this since we've been talking. No other music form in the world has affected the entire world the way that hip hop culture has. Not reggae, not rock, not classical, nothing has touched the whole world, because you can go overseas right now and find somebody who dresses like you, somebody who listens to the same songs as you. That didn't happen with any other art form. As low as they try to make hip hop seem on the totem pole of art, hip hop is the top effector of the world. So if hip hop sucks, if hip hop is terrible, if it's stale, if it's whack, if every song sounds the same, what is the rest of the world learning about hip hop? What you learning? You learning how to be a clone. Instead of somebody learning how to be a scientist, like Ghostface said, I revolve around science. If somebody doesn't get that message, if the prominent message is, man, think about yourself, get money, get bitches. You teaching a little kid that over in the Congo, and that's his first lesson in hip hop. Like if you didn't get, you know, KRS-One saying you must learn, the first thing you got was a motherfucker talking about, you know, my shooters and what I'm wearing, and you know, like really, that's like your initiation into it. So yeah, so I'm just asking for one thing as far as the artists are concerned, right? Substance. If it ain't no substance, you have nothing. I'm asking for more progress, less poison. Because every time I hear something, as far as like, you know, the million view kings and all those things, the song is, the song is, like, what did this dude just say? So the question is, do you want them leading your kids? Do you want them leading you? Or do you expect them to carry on the legacy of Martin and Malcolm and Cornel West and people, you know, Tony Blackness? Do you expect the dude that started the song like, you want him leading you? Just think about that when you're listening to this stuff and when you're worried about what your babies are going to be listening to. I taught my kids off Jump Street, and I didn't tell them what was whack. I would play them good music. I would play them Abbey Lincoln and John Coltrane. You need to start first, because that's where hip-hop comes from. You can't get to Drake if you ain't listening to Duke Ellington. Because you may think that Drake owes nothing to Duke, but if it wasn't for Duke, and people like Duke, people that were struggling when, you know, music was not this like cash cow, yeah, then you wouldn't have your Hotline Bling. So yeah, think about that. It's the music that you study that's going to affect what you say when you go in the booth. So I'm not listening to if I'm trying to help y'all out. If I'm trying to write that song that makes you like not want to commit suicide, I'm not studying that dude. I don't want to know who he studied, because it ain't going to work. If you keep letting that go, if we keep accepting it, because it's not just the artists, it's the people who support the music too. It's me too when I'm a consumer. It's you too when you're a consumer. If you don't add to the progress and you keep supporting what I like to call whack shit, next February, you're going to get a song called Martin Luther King Was My Nigga. Be careful, you think it's a joke, and that might sound real crass to some people, but if those are your leaders, and that's all you left with, and it's only one or two dudes, yeah, we need some conscious artists to come to the award show. Who we gonna call? Well, Kendrick is hot right now. Now let's call all the people that used to be hot in the 90s, Erykah Badu, Common, The Roots, Talib, and all those people I love, but if that's it, and 80% of this is you got a problem. Remember, look at it right now. Like, let's push for the progress, yo, because you do not want to wake up next February and hear Martin Luther King, and your kids will think it's okay. Chuck.
Yeah. So I'm gonna ask a question. I'm gonna move around. I'm about to come out.
Yeah, real quick, I had one thing to touch on.
Oh, yeah.
Something you just said.
Yeah,
I'm
go
sorry. So Tim touched on something that was like kind of interesting, and I can't say I wholeheartedly agree with that, because as time goes on, music progresses, right? And yeah. And each sound, of course, it contributes to the generation and what the generation is craving at the time. When we were in the 20s, we had jazz, and we had Billie Holiday singing "Strange Fruit," and you know that was the message at that time, and that's what flowed at that time. You know what I mean? Now we're in a transitional point with hip hop where it's embracing more melodies and we're singing more rather than rapping more. So why aren't conscious rappers doing that? Why aren't we being culturally responsive to what the youth want to listen to? If you want to speak to the youth and you see that they're interested in, they're interested in Drake, why aren't we making music that is giving an actual message, but that give them that substance though?
Great point. Excellent point. I'll tell you the best way I can explain. And I'm not disputing you because you made an excellent point, and that is the thing. I'm 38. What I listen to is what I listen to, and it's not going to necessarily be something for the swag generation. And that's not a diss, all right? If you try to copy, right, whatever's out now, right, you try to say, all right, we're going to do the music this way, but we're going to say positive stuff over this type of music. Start with the beat. You may like a trap beat, but do you like it because you like it, or you like it because everybody likes it? Do you like it because that's every time you see, again, we usually go with the million view kings. We ain't looking at for somebody that got 500 views because you're like, oh, well, if nobody's viewing it, it can't be hot. So my question is, is it going to help in that way? Because I've heard a couple I've heard some people, I'm not going to call their names because I love them and they inspire me to do what I do. They are the reason, like I go back to their old stuff if the new stuff ain't rocking for me. But I heard some of them even try to do songs in the form of now. It never works. Because I'm listening to it and I'm like, hold up. See, let me stop because I'm getting ready to quote old lyrics and bring in new lyrics and you know exactly who I'm talking about. But there are some artists that are quote unquote or were quote unquote conscious that have tried some of those experiments. It doesn't work. DJ Premier said this best. He's like, look, I'm not knocking this generation. We need that. We needed NWA. As same as we need a Tribe Called Quest. Because somebody had to talk about Compton. Tribe is from Jamaica, Queens. They can't tell you the story of Compton and what's happening over there. So I'm not in here necessarily saying, oh, it's going to be positive, it's going to be progressive. Nah, Wu-Tang, man, Wu forever. Wu ain't never said nothing really, you know, necessarily that, but at the same time I stop and I think about, you know, as I, you know, living in a world no different from a cell. Like, you know, the dude is talking to either his mom or his lady and she's like, working hard will help you maintain. That's Wu. That's Staten Island Projects. Huey Newton was a gangster. He was from the hood, but Huey said, yo, instead of these guys, instead of we keep promoting the gang message, let me get these gangsters to do something right. You can't do that if you trying to, if I'm coming like, you know, telling people like, you know, uplift the spirit of Harriet Tubman or whatever, it's like, are they really gonna hear me if I was like, Harriet? Maybe. But if it's not genuine to you, I don't think you should do it. But there has to be a meeting point. It's got to be a bridge because it ain't going to be, otherwise it's just going to be swag versus, I'll just say old, because that's what people look at me, oh, like, I'm 38 years young, they like, dude.
See, but this is once again, Jarritt, why I think it's important for us to have safe spaces, spaces where all heads can gather together and be uniquely themselves. We don't have them anymore, so then we get into politics of the music business and of culture and the gentrification of venues that are shut down, of the lack of support of the arts, about institutions that have no space for heads to gather, just to build. I mean, there's no place even for the elderly to go sing and have a sing-along. Like, get along some rappers and get together and come together. Because in that space is where consciousness rises. And it's self-initiated. It's through from being around this dude and her, and then you see a better way, and you want to be different. But I just think that's like one of the biggest tests, and we neglect this over and over and over again. And even the quote, conscious community doesn't get it. Because everybody's competing for the grant.
I just want to say this is not self-promo, but what she said is very key. It's not just about the people that you think are the enemy. It's the conscious crowd too. I had a line in the song where I said, conscious rappers failing to see that it's quick time. Because they entered a different world where nobody defends the blind. Don't nobody care about half the stuff that the conscious crowd was speaking about before. So it's like, how do you affect this generation? How do you approach them and meet them where they are, but still meet them in a dope way? Remember this, DJ Premier said, I don't want to hear 20 of the same thing. I don't want to hear, if you sound like somebody else, he said this on an interview. Back in the day, you would get punched when you came in the club. Because somebody would see you like, yo, you bit off my style. Now, hey man, it must be one big happy family because everything is done.
Jamie had something to say. And what I'd like to do is we'll take a couple questions. All right. And I think we have one more activity after that. So go ahead, Jamie.
Something that I just wanted to point out in listening to this really interesting debate to me about how like old school conscious versus current trap music. I can tell you're a huge fan of Fetty Wap based on here, right? But something that I perceive within hip hop as is its unique power to be a counter narrative to the dominant cultural narrative that has been built into every institution in American history, and that space has a lot of power, which the concern of really transcendent individuals like everybody on this panel is, what do we do with this medium, right? But thinking about it, taking it a step farther back in that the conditions in which this healing needs to happen, the conditions in which this regrouping and action need to happen are not things that hip-hop created. Hip-hop happened as a response, as a form of healing, as a form of counter-narrative. And so taking a step back from how do we best serve ourselves as to why, like, what power do we hold here beyond within conscious old school 80s versus 70s versus today. And that through line there is the power to engage the youth whenever that is, to engage people that are not currently having the conversation and are not knowing that these are not conditions that hip hop created. These are not conditions that people of color created. And that's where the power is coming from, is that that hip hop is the first full genre to make a space for counter narrative and for challenging the history books that say that slavery was like workers. Something, right. Like, these are things that people are actually reading in their textbooks right now. And so creating space to have these conversations and unpacking the fact that the way that it's written right now is not neutral, and that it is something that hip hop has the power to, because of how compelling and how transcendent it has been and continues to be in all the ways that it transforms. Like, that's where the power lies.
Hey. We're going to open it up for some questions, so we're going to go right here. If you want to ask questions, just come over here.
Hey, sure. What's up, everybody? First off, I want to give a hand to Jarritt and all those team panelists for being here, and for everybody for being here. Urgent times that we're in. My name is Jamel Mims. I'm the program manager for Fresh Prep, which uses hip hop to teach global and U.S. history in English. There's a program that was mentioned here at the panel as well. I'm also a multimedia artist, a rapper, and revolutionary out on the front lines against mass incarceration and resisting that. And I have a question, and I want to actually bring it fiercely and urgently to the present. We're living in a world where every 28 hours, every other day you turn on a video or open up your YouTube or your Snapchat or your Instagram, you find a snuff video of a kid getting gunned down by police or brutalized. We're living in a world where this is constant, and this is a constant threat. And we've seen people, in fact, we've seen artists take numerous stands around this and be transformed within this. You know, you have folks like Janelle Monáe and Jadena with Hell You Talking About. How many folks heard this song or been a part of this movement, right? Or you have folks like people have mentioned Cornel West, who founded the Stop Mass Incarceration Network with Carl Dix, right? There are plans this Saturday actually for a conference to have students gather with parents of victims of police murder and actually plan conferences all throughout February. So we're in the midst of a lot of movement, right? A lot of movement, and a lot of music and a lot of art has been around this. But every day we see another video, right? We hear a lot of different songs, and there's been a lot of different art and culture around this, but every other day there's another video, again and again. And so, look, I make art and music, I work in nonprofit, all that, but the question that I keep coming to over and over and over again is, how do we put an end to this shit? Like, actually end it. So that it's not a world that our children have to live in, like Tim mentioned, but so that it's also a world that we don't have to live in, right? And so that's really the question I kind of want to present to the panelists to speak on, and then also people who are here. Again, I want people to, to come out this Saturday to help plan these conferences that are going to be happening all throughout Black History Month. But in addition to that, let's kick some ideas around right now. We'll actually solve this problem.
Any comments? Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Not an easy question to answer, but it shouldn't be. I think now is the time to focus on strictly solutions. And now is the time to organize in a way where there has to be something tangible, and there has to be accountability and consistency. So how do we get to the point that you're talking about? We have to be humble enough to understand that it's going to be a very, very hard process. And we have to be real enough to understand that we're going to have to give a part of ourselves to get to that point. We're going to have to give up something. We're going to have to sacrifice as a people. All those that really, really care are going to have to put themselves in some kind of danger. Because what you're asking for is a better tomorrow, but that's not going to come without some great risk. And this type of conversation has to happen and occur more than once a year, more than once a month. We all have to have our own teams of people. We have to meet weekly if we have to. We have to call each other. We have to strategize. We have to have like very, very specific, detailed plans and experiments and processes. But what we can't do is just talk about it, and we just can't let it go. And we just can't hashtag about it. The hashtag will not be, you know, the way the revolution goes. We have to put ourselves in some danger, because even a coward can update their status. But we have to really put something of ourselves. We have to be altruistic. We have to put ourselves in some kind of danger in order to get to more peace.
Just another quick, I totally agree with you, but I think in addition, we have to work on and think about how can we change the narrative of hip hop and hip hop culture, right? I don't think anything's wrong necessarily with the narrative, but something's wrong with how society perceives hip hop, right? And the reason why I believe we have so many young men of color being gunned down or brutalized in our streets is because these police officers, they have they have the wrong perception of people who consume hip hop music, right? So if I'm wearing a hoodie, right, although I'm a doctoral candidate, I'm a teacher, I love the youth, people may view me as violent because I'm wearing a hoodie, and you know, you identify somebody wearing a hoodie as somebody in a rap music video where, like in a Chief Keef video where they had guns or whatever in the background, what have you. So people just feel like intimidated when it comes to hip hop and hip hop culture. But that's not the perception. That's not what hip hop actually is. So that comes with us, and that's what consumers and like these big labels want people to perceive hip hop as, because that's what makes money, right? That's what people want to consume. That's what people consistently consume. So there are 6 major media corporations that disseminate media in the whole world. 6 conglomerates, and obviously, I don't think that we as individuals have the power, energy, or resources just as individuals to go against those conglomerates, but we do have our technology, and we have ways to create our own media, right? So everybody has an Instagram or Twitter account or some way, and that's a way to bring up, to use your voice and to share the real and actual narrative that hip hop has. Right, and that's what we're doing with Science Genius. That's what we're doing. We're bringing hip hop into all these educational programs. We're showing the different phases of hip hop, and we're showing how hip hop can actually benefit the people that it's meant to benefit and serve.
Hey, that was a good question. We have limited time, so we're gonna go to the next question. But I would say that's a very Du Boisian way to deal with it. You know, it's part of that propaganda. But that's one of the things. You know, check out W.E.B. Du Bois if you want to learn how to change a people's way of thinking. One of the ways is propaganda. You know, because everybody says something. You know, who says it first, right? And then the person behind them has to come and say something totally radically different. So we have another question. We're gonna pivot real quick.
So my question is, how do you counteract the sexism and misogyny that is often promoted by black male rappers? Like, when does it start being about elevating everyone and like stop being about silencing women and writing them off as bitches and hoes?
I think one way is you take them out back and beat them bloody. But then another way is that you really start promoting more sacred femininity throughout the history, and you push it, because there's so many artists out there that are women that are not getting any voices. Their voices not getting anywhere. Luckily, there's people like FKA Twigs that's coming out, and there's all these different alternative voices that the people can see, because male consciousness, as you keep growing and moving, there's these misogynistic tendencies. I have everybody I know has, and it's an internal fight that you have to fight as a man within, and then you should project that, and you should write about it and see who else is affected by that same thing. So as men start fighting that war within to have more of a, I would say, a loving more type of energy when it comes to the opposite sex. You can put that through art, and then you can promote the sisters that are doing it also. But it's really difficult. It's extremely difficult, and I don't know how it would just stop with the mainstream.
I believe, and this is like to answer both questions. I believe that there's a lack of value in, especially in the Black community, and you know, if we don't value ourselves and value each other, then it'll be easy for us to pick up a gun and kill ourselves, and it'll be easy for us to call women bitches and hoes. If all we see when we're watching TV is people who represent us, they're not positive at all, and they're putting us, they're like shining a light on this negative stereotype. Of course, that's gonna be embedded in the culture. But Tony Blackman said earlier, it's just like, it's all about reflection. It's all about asking yourself when you wake up, before you do anything, before you have any conversation. It's like, and who am I as a person? Do I see the value of myself? And when I see the value of myself, then I can see the value, and then I can say, okay, I see that I'm a queen, so I know that every female I encounter is a queen, and every male that I encounter is a king. You know, it's all about value. And right now, in terms of like the music industry, we're in the midst of like giving hip hop up. We're giving it away right now. Just like we gave up jazz, rock and roll, all of these things. Why is it that Macklemore is the conscious rapper and he's like the face for conscious rap? And we have people like Fetty Wap who are representing us. That, it's like this is modern day slavery. This is where we are right now. It's like we're going, you say, hey, I can spit, oh, I'm gonna go get somebody to sign me. And then all you're doing is signing away your life and becoming a slave, to have a slave master to tell you what kind of music to put out, so they control your image and what they want you to do to represent your community. It's about accountability. We have to be real with ourselves and be like, yo, you're not gonna make me out to be somebody that I'm not. I'm going to take control of who I am, and I know what I am and what I stand for, and then that leaves room for us to like actually see each other as equal in value and appreciate everybody.
You know, just one more thing to. Oh, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to add to this. I think it's really important. I know we have limited time, so I'll go really fast. I think it's really important to understand that hip hop is a microcosm of the greater world, and that we not isolate sexism and oppression and misogyny to rap. And so I think we walk on dangerous waters when we talk about Black male rappers oppressing Black women. Let's just talk about men oppressing women, and let's acknowledge, 2,000 plus years of socialization in which men have been trained and programmed to want to suppress women's voices and to oppress women. And so, but it comes back to, I think it's also this idea of masculine and feminine energy, and identifying how much the masculine has been in charge, and that we're going through this space where the feminine is needed more and more and more. And part of that involves women being able to have authentic conversation with the men in their lives that they have access to, and not waiting for some activist to come out of the sky and lead the revolution to help women. And so sometimes those conversations can be very difficult for women to have, right? Because we're afraid of rejection. We're afraid of being called a bitch. We're afraid of this. But you have to put yourself in these spaces where you can challenge the men in your lives, the men who are present in your circle. And I think that's the most important thing that each of us in this room can do. Women, I've been having a lot of tough conversations this year with men. I got 3 I need to have over the next month, with men who called me for letters of recommendation but have not supported my work in the last 7 years, have not sent their students to my events, have not shown up, have not tweeted, promoted, but they showed up when they needed something. And historically, in my younger years, as a woman taught and trained in a patriarchal family, my job was to serve. And particularly men, I show up, and I'd work no matter how tired I was. I don't do that no more. So, But now I gotta have these conversations. But I think it's also important for the men in the room to confront your friends. When you sense something being said, I don't care if it's just the slightest, most subtle thing wrong, to challenge them. Are you sure? What makes you say that? Why would you say that? And I think that issue is a really important question that she brought up. But the solution really has to start with us. Otherwise, we're stuck looking for somebody else to make the change happen. And then another 10 years goes by.
Okay. So, hey, yeah, clap, please applaud. So, I wanna thank her for coming out, but before we leave, we're gonna do one last thing. I'll have my Maury moment. I'll just say this. Everybody's too young for this. So, Jermaine at the end, he has a really cool hat on. What does it say on the top? Descent. Right. So this is great artist I like that Obey. Everybody ever seen his work? And there's this TV show that just recently came out on Amazon Prime, in which is, the premise is you either collaborate or you resist. I don't know if anybody's seen that. You should check it out. It's a dope show. In which is a post-apocalyptic time, right? And so either you collaborate or you resist, right? You're with the foolishness or you resist it, right? And so one of the last thing I wanted to do before we left is, Tony is really great with talking about the cipher, starting the cipher, and a lot of us don't quite know what a cipher is, so do you mind talking about that?
Let's close with a cipher.
Yeah.
Oh, you ready?
Yeah.
Hip hop. Are you ready? Okay, so let's close. Anybody rhyme in the audience? Any singers? We got a couple of singers. Any singers?
Talisa?
Yes? Okay, so we're gonna close with a cipher. That's nice. Okay, so if you get the mic, be careful, because if you hold it like this, you get distorted. And it's not nice to listen to distorted rhymes.
Yeah.
So just pay attention to the dynamics of where you place this microphone, this particular one, so we can all have a pleasant experience aesthetically speaking and sonically with your voice. So we're gonna have a little cipher. We're gonna close with a little cipher. Do we have a beatboxer in the room? All right. That's dope. What's a hip hop panel without some hip hop? We got dancers? We got somebody to dance? Oh, he dances. He dancing beatbox. Any other dancers? I see your hands up, girl. No. Okay, so what kind of beat you got?
It's a little song.
So we gonna rhyme about the topics on the panel. So the questions were about activism, changing hip hop, change hip hop is created, making America better. Forget about Donald Trump. Make America great again. 2016, education, the classroom, what we need to do. Don't be afraid to call something whack, the quote of the day. Okay, so, y'all ready? So we got mics. How many mics we got? Many. Okay, so you got a melody to set the scene? No words, just a little melody. Okay, you'll be first.
Ready?
No.
Alright.
Get that beat going.
The other singers in the room can join in with her. Come on. Come on,
Okay. not making sense. Sorry, just got put on the spot. Change used to happen. Everybody used to happen. Come on, whenever you're and you whenever
So check it. We sitting here. He's about to make it all real clear. We want you to understand what it means to be free and what it means to be an MC. We're talking about you activating. And right now, there don't be no mistaking. We got to be together, got to be relating in NYC down to DC. I'm telling you, see me, I spit this poetry so that I can make my people be free. From mental slavery, I'm letting loose. And right now, I'm telling you, I need no proof. Check this, it's evidence right on the table. Too many lies and too many fables. I said, don't Trump, and yes, that happened. Telling you right now, say we gonna start clapping back. But as a matter of fact, I don't know what's wrong with my country, but the odds seem to be a stack against my people. Why people steadily praying to a steeple instead of recognizing the God that's within and trying to become their own best friend. What? Got it out as we get Guttman and I beat Tony Black on what?
It's done, right? About is it? You should have on that note. Yeah.
So we want to give it up. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. I want to thank Stephen. I'd like to thank Jamie and Rashad and Tim and Edmund and Tony and Shay and Jermaine, who had to leave for prior engagement. And we want to thank you all for being here. We want to thank the faculty, the administration, President Everbag, specifically Marcus Allen, who made it possible with the Black Male Initiative. Tell them you like it, and maybe we'll do some more stuff. And next time it'll start off being like a 2-hour cycle. But other than that, I hope you have a great day. I think one of your SSAs told me just to say that, hey, everybody, Thursday's the last day of the draw. So you might want to know that, so you don't fail. Other than that, give it up for your panelists. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Hey, real quick, I want to leave you with one message. If you want all lives to matter, we got to kill race. All right? The race is something you run.
True.
If you're not the color of Judge's jacket or his shirt, you're not black or white. So think about that when you go home.
That's what's up.